Come in or tune in. Either way, don't miss it. Discussions resume in the People's House, and this time we focus on Tobago's autonomy. The House will call on Secretary of Legal Affairs Adana Joseph Wallace to guide the creation of a framework for structured consultation with the people of Tobago as the pursuit of self-determination continues. The House will also call on the central government to take all steps to recognize and protect the distinct status and self-determination of the island and people of Tobago. This time, we meet on Friday.
Who say Friday?
Friday.
Who say Friday?
Friday.
27th February from 10 a.m. Our doors are open and all channels are clear. Come in or tune in. Either way, don't miss it.
Let us now pray. O Almighty God, as we come together to begin our meeting of the Assembly, we humbly beseech you to grant to all our members the light and guidance of your Holy Spirit, that we may wisely take counsel together and come to such decisions as shall promote your glory and the well-being of all our citizens in our land, so that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be enjoyed by all people. Grant this for the sake of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. You may be seated.
Oath of allegiance of a new member. Announcements by the presiding officer.
Honorable members, in accordance with Standing Orders 13.3, I am appointing Assembly Member Trevor James as leader of Assembly business for today's sittings. Honorable members, I have received leave of absence for today's sittings from the Honorable Chief Secretary, Fali Chavez Augustine, and Councillor Adana Wallace Joseph. The leaves are granted.
Assembly bills sent back from Cabinet. Assembly laws brought back from Parliament. Petitions, papers.
Secretary of Finance, Trade and the Economy.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I stand to lay the following statements. Tobago House of Assembly monthly budget report as at the end of October 2025 and the Tobago House of Assembly monthly budget report as at the end of November 2025. Thank you very much.
Presentation of reports from Dispute Resolution Commission, select committees. Chief Secretary's questions, questions to secretaries, questions for oral answers. Requests for leave to move the adjournment of the Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance. Statements by secretaries or assistant secretaries.
Secretary of Finance, Trade and the Economy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Presiding Officer. Good morning to you and the fellow members of this Honorable House. Allow me this morning to extend also congratulations to you, Presiding Officer, for your appointment. And I also wish you the success, wisdom, and fortitude as you discharge this important responsibility entrusted to you. And I have every confidence that you will judiciously, impartially, and confidently build on the commendable work by those who previously held the position as presiding officer in this legislative chamber. Mr. Presiding Officer, I am grateful for the opportunity to address this House on the matter that I believe is of fundamental importance for the people of Tobago. At this juncture, I wish to express my sincere gratitude to the Chief Secretary for entrusting me with this position as Secretary of Finance and continuing to serve in that position. It's a position which I take very, very seriously. This morning, I am about to lay a statement of financial position of the Tobago House of Assembly as at January 31st, 2026. You will recall in January 2022, the Honorable Chief Secretary, in his capacity as Secretary responsibility for Finance, Trade and the Economy, presented a very comprehensive statement on the financial position of the Tobago House of Assembly as at December 13, 2021. Mr. Presiding Officer, at the time, the people of Tobago were transitioning from more than 20 years of governance under the former leadership of the the People's National Movement. Mr. Presiding Officer, following discussions with the Honorable Chief Secretary, we consider it both timely and imperative to present to the people of Tobago through this House a status report on the current financial position of the Tobago House of Assembly as at January 31st, 2026. Mr. Presiding Officer, we consider it both timely and necessary in keeping with our commitment to accountability and transparency to present this statement. Notwithstanding the continuation of a Tobago People's Party administration, we are embarking on a new term in office with a renewed mandate from the people of Tobago, and it is therefore appropriate that we provide a clear and open account of the Assembly's financial position as at 31st January 2026. Mr. Presiding Officer, the absence of a formal opposition in this House, we thought it also imperative to be deliberately transparent and forthright in the stewardship and management of the resources of the THA, fully mindful of our fiduciary responsibility to the people of Tobago. Our commitment to transparency is driven by a deep philosophical understanding that everything must lead to the development of Tobago and Tobagonians, because Tobago is we. Having established the context of my presentation, it is a tremendous honor for me to present to you the fiscal and financial position of the THA for the period, as I mentioned earlier, 31st January 2026. The presentation will focus on the following areas: the parliamentary appropriations to the THA for fiscal 2026 across recurrent development program, CPEP, and URP. The releases that we received from the Ministry of Finance as at the 31st January 2026. Tax revenues collected on behalf of the people of Tobago from, as at 31st January 2026. The unspent balances and other balances brought forward from fiscal 2025, actual expenditures, liabilities, commitments, as at the same period, 31st January 2026, with a comparative analysis to fiscal 2025, major spending impacts focusing on expenditures in key areas and priorities in this fiscal year. Then I will conclude the presentation with an assessment of the cash balances, including outstanding balances from the central government for our parliamentary appropriation for fiscal 2026. Mr. Presiding Officer, for context and methodological clarity, it is important that I mention here that the Tobago House of Assembly operates totally and only on a cash-based accounting system. This means that revenues are recorded when received and expenditures are entered when they are paid. Mr. Presiding Officer, on Monday, 13th October 2025, the Minister of Finance presented the 2026 fiscal package for Trinidad and Tobago. Therein, the Minister of Finance announced the allocation of $2.96 billion, or 5% of the national budget, to the Tobago House of Assembly for fiscal 2026. Mr. Presiding Officer, the allocation to the THA was disaggregated as follows: $2.742 billion on the recurrent allocation, $201.5 million for a development program. Additional allocations were made to CPEP and URP of $9.2 million and $18 million, respectively. It is worth noting here that the 5% share of the national budget allocated to the THA for fiscal 2026 constitute the largest allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly in its 45-year history. The allocation amounts to an increase of approximately $362.5 million over the allocation made to the THA in fiscal 2025. Mr. Presiding Officer, the revenues that were available to the THA as at the 31st of January 2026 was $1.244.3 billion from the central government. $54 million was collected in terms of tax revenues up to that similar period, and the unspent balances from fiscal 2025 collected so far was $157.9 million. Mr. Presiding Officer, what the data is saying is that the total revenues or monies that are available to this administration for the period October 1st, 2025 to January 31st, 2026 was $1.456 billion. Expenditure. The total expenditure as at the 31st January 2026 as follows. Recurrent expenditure, we have so far spent, excluding commitments in the total Tobago House of Assembly, $732.3 million. Under the development program, we have so far actually spent $41.5 million, CPEP, $9.1 million, URP, $18 million. Mr. Presiding Officer, it is important to note that the shortfall in releases from the relevant ministries for CPEP and URP were funded from unspent balances brought forward from the fiscal year 2025. Mr. Presiding Officer, the following are major and impactful expenditures incurred as at the 31st of January 2026. We made payments to contractors for inherited liabilities and other liabilities under Division of Infrastructure of $37.2 million. We gave support to students who were affected by Hurricane Melissa, Tobago students, who were affected by Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica, a total of $520,000. The total gratuities spent up to January 31st, 2026 was $19.1 million. The bursaries to tertiary level students with an allocation of 0, we were still able to fund up to $999, or we spent $999,000 for bursaries to tertiary level students from Tobago. We also liquidated debts under Tobago Festivals Commission Limited of $17 million and investment in training and human capital development across Tobago for public officers, $2 million. Mr. Presiding Officer, I choose to present the recorded expenditure for the same period, the period October 1st to December 2024 and October 1st to December 2025. The intention is to demonstrate that there was no elevated expenditures for the period 1st October 2025 to 31st December 2025, occasioned by the recently concluded THA election. Simply put, to show that there was no need for this administration to engage in electioneering spending to beat the now defunct PNM by 15-0. Mr. Presiding Officer, the recorded expenditure across major heads of expenditure, and I go back to fiscal 2025, which is October 1st, 2024 to December 31st, 2024. Under recurrent, we spent $511.1 million under recurrent expenditure for the same period in fiscal 2026, which is October 1st to December 31st, 2025, we spent $549.3. Under the development program, in fiscal 2025, for the period for the first 3 months of the fiscal year, December to October to December, we spent $20.1 million. And for the same period in 2025, we spent $29.4 million under development program. CPEP, we spent in fiscal 2025, $7.2 million, and for the same first quarter period, we spent $7.8 million. Under the Unemployment Relief Program, fiscal 2025, first quarter, we spent $19.2 million, and in fiscal 2026, same period, October to December 2025, we spent $17.9 million. Mr. Presiding Officer, this information reveals that expenditures for comparative periods were $557.6 million and $604.4 million, which produced a very small increase of only 8% in spending during, if we compare the both first quarter of the both periods. And this is indicative that clearly we did not engage in electioneering spending to beat the politically expired People's National Movement 15-0. Mr. Presiding Officer, I will now turn to the net cash position of the THA, and I will explain it in detail. The net cash position will just basically show how much we have received thus far from central government in terms of releases and how much the THA has spent. Now, the net cash position would also include the monies that we brought forward for unspent balances from fiscal 2025. And again, the total cash we have collected from central government as well as our unspent balances was 1.456.2 billion. The Tobago House of Assembly have since spent 800.9 million. So we have a surplus of cash of 655.3 million. However, I wish to explain and point that central government has already sent releases for February. This is a position as of January. So we would have received releases for the period to come. Included in that surplus is also the unspent balances of 157 million, of which we have not spent a substantial sum of it. Mr. Presiding Officer, I will now go into our liabilities and commitments. The total commitments and liabilities reported are $695.4 million as at the 31st of January 2026. Included in this figure are long-term liabilities, and that includes the bond financing that we are expected to pay in 2027 of $164.5 million, and the obligations for the Millshave lease agreement that ends in 2036 of $200 million. I've also included in that $695 million figure verifiable outstanding amongst the contractors in the amount of $260 million, of which we will settle as funding becomes available. The balances that we expect from the central government for the rest of the fiscal period, we expect to receive $1.593 billion for recurrent expenditure. We expect to receive $117.5 million for development program. For CPEP, $6.8 million, URP, $9 million, a total of $1.7263 billion is expected to be collected up to September 30th, 2026. As I conclude, Mr. Presiding Officer, as members of this Honorable House are aware, the Chief Secretary, in his wisdom and deliberate effort to enhance service delivery, undertook an expansion and adjustment of the institutional footprint of the Tobago House of Assembly. Mr. Presiding Officer, with the change of the structure of the THA, the financial commitments will inevitably expand, especially under recurrent expenditure. It is against this backdrop that there is a heightened and necessary obligation to assess the financial position of the Tobago House of Assembly to more effectively align available resources to ensure greater efficiency and improved service delivery to the people of Tobago. Mr. Presiding Officer, it is anticipated that these structural and financial adjustments will have implications for the sequencing and prioritization of the development agenda, as I outlined in the revised budget in November of 2025. Accordingly, the development agenda will now expand to ensure delivery of the commitments made as articulated in the Tobago People's Party blueprint and in keeping with the strategic development planning pathway towards the greatest little island on the planet, 2025 to 2045 for Tobago. Mr. Presiding Officer, with that being said, I thank you and I respectfully submit this statement. Thank you.
Personal explanations, introductions of bills. Motions relating to the business or sittings of the Assembly and moved by a Secretary or Assistant Secretary. Public business, motion.
You may now stand and move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. It is, as always, an honor and a pleasure to be able to stand in this House. Before I move the motion, permit me, Mr. Presiding Officer, to thank the good people of Scarborough Mount Grace who, by their voice, by their vote, by their will, I stand in this house to represent them and to be their voice as we, as a TPP government, attempt to represent the people of Tobago. Mr. Speaker, we asked for all seats. I believe I was in the house in Trinidad. Mr. Presiding Officer, we asked for 15 seats, not because we could not manage the Tobago House of Assembly with a small majority, but we wanted to make sure that when we spoke and when we speak in this house, there would be no doubt that we were representing the majority of Tobagonians in every nook and every cranny of the Tobago nation. I dare to say, Mr. Presiding Officer, without interference from non-Tobago political entities. We in the TPP believe strongly that we represent the voice and the will of the people in this house, and that our major political goal is to restore full self-determination to the people of Tobago on their terms. As part of this inherent right to self-determination vested in the very being of a people, we believe that this first motion is but the first ship in our fleet of legislative agenda that we will anchor in this house. It is intended to create a legal process that activates the will of the people and authorize formal consultative referenda confined to Tobago. So the motion, whereas the island and people of Tobago, prior to the union with Trinidad in 1889, exercised a distinct political and cultural standing, still recognized by the Constitution and laws of Trinidad and Tobago, and whereas in its final act as a legislature, the Tobago House of Assembly 139 years ago passed a motion in this very house to preserve, protect, and affirm the right of Tobago and its people to determine their status within the Union of Trinidad and Tobago. And whereas the people of Tobago continue to pursue their right to self-determination, self-government, and equality of status in all matters that concern the sustained peace and prosperity of the island, and whereas the existing legislative proposals for Tobago's self-determination do not provide a comprehensive framework for structured consultation of the people of Tobago on matters critical to their governance and status within the Republic, be it resolved that this House calls on the Cabinet and the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago to take all necessary consultative and legislative steps to recognize and protect the distinct status and self-determination of the island and people of Tobago. And be it further resolved that this House calls on the Secretary of Legal Affairs to convene in consultation with the Tobago House of Assembly and representative stakeholders of Tobago a legislative drafting process to establish a clear statutory framework for consultative referenda so that the voice and expressed will of the people of Tobago may be formally determined and authoritatively conveyed on matters central to their governance, status, and self-determination. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Presiding Officer, I will not make a mistake again. Mr. Presiding Officer, we are not seeking to divide the Republic. We are seeking to complete it by allowing the people of Tobago to speak clearly, lawfully, and peacefully about their future. all Tobagonians and right-thinking humans should agree that the ultimate political authority over the people of Tobago must be the people themselves. Inherent in the sovereignty of the Tobagonian people must be the right to directly approve or reject laws and constitutional arrangements that speak to our very being, that it would be unnaturally adverse to popular imperative for these decisions to be made by others elsewhere. The direct democracy of referenda should be the watcher over human rights inherent and innate in our being, and the check on legislative power that should pass laws inimical to our well-being. There should be no real substitute for legitimacy of laws by us through legal processes that happen among us. If, therefore, we are to look at the history to assess the constitutional and institutional status of Tobago within the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, an elucidating overview could be adduced. Although our history is rife with socio-political activism, the common thread of disregard for the will of the voice of Tobago has ever been with us, and brings into sharp focus the question of democratic purity and legitimacy of many of our legislative and constitutional milestones. It must be noted, Mr. Presiding Officer, that neither Tobago nor Trinidad initiated the union that we now call Trinidad and Tobago. The following notice appeared in both the Tobago Gazette and the Trinidad Gazette. And I quote, "Her Majesty's government, having had under their consideration the condition and prospect of the colony of Tobago, and having regard to this geographical proximity to and means of communication with the colony of Trinidad, we are of the opinion," this is Her Majesty's government, "that it would be for the advantage of both colonies that the colony of Tobago should be annexed to and form part of the said colony of Trinidad." The key word there is annex. Such annexation may be effected in either of the two following modes. One, this is the British Crown. The colony of Tobago may be wholly and completely incorporated with the colony of Trinidad. Or two, the colony of Tobago may be annexed to the colony of Trinidad as a dependency, having a separate treasury and subordinate legislature, holding to Trinidad the same relation that the Turks and Caicos at the time do to Jamaica. The former of these two schemes appear to be preferable. Her Majesty's government are, however, desirous of ascertaining the opinions and wishes of the inhabitants of both colonies upon this subject. And after sufficient time has elapsed for full consideration of the question, resolutions in favor of incorporation of Tobago with Trinidad, or as an alternative of annexation as a dependency, will be introduced in the legislative councils of each of the colonies. Meaning to say that the government of Britain, in fact, had an informal referenda where they asked or got the views of Tobagonians and Trinidadians, or will be seeking to get the views before both islands were, as it turned out, to be incorporated together. The British government, knowing Tobago, did not even think to err on the side of annexation, although Trinidad preferred it. And that is why one has to wonder about the timing of some of the legislative and constitutional changes in this country as seen. And one has to question these changes accordingly. By the mid-1900s, oil and gas industry was proving a stable industrial driver for Trinidad and Tobago, it had become clear that money will flow and continue to flow. Around the same time, Dr. Williams and the PNM came into the political scene, and by 1956, the PNM had taken control over the government of Trinidad and Tobago. By June 1957, Dr. Williams made a famous statement, which I quote from one of his books: Tobago had exchanged the neglect of the United Kingdom imperialism for the neglect of Trinidad imperialism, corrupted by the forms of self-government in Trinidad up to the last election. This is the election of 56 he's speaking about. Tobago had to pay a price, according to Williams, for its union with Trinidad, which it never ought to have paid. This is Eric Williams' direct quote. So the neglect of Tobago was well known, and Tobago's displeasure with how it was being treated within the union was also well known. Also happening in the late 50s, Trinidad and Tobago became part of the West Indies Federation. Again, as it happened, at the same time, oil and gas finds in Trinidad and Tobago's waters were trending northward. And so oil and gas discovery started creeping towards Tobago. Yes, oil and gas finds in the late 1950s was proven to be moving towards Tobago. And at that time, we had an unhappy Tobago. By May 1962, as I try to make the point, by May 1962, the West Indies Federation, as we all know from our history books, collapsed. Trinidad could have stayed in the Federation, decided to leave the Federation after Jamaica left. And the question that arose for Trinidad and Tobago was what would now be in the mind of Tobago when Trinidad decided to leave a federation that was not working out for Trinidad and supposedly Tobago. Clearly, an unhappy Tobago in a union that was proven to be patently disadvantageous and otherwise undesirable. And do you remember what was Tobago's plan if that happened? Tobago, by the last act in this very house, petitioned the British Crown that if the union proved to be undesirable, that it would come back to the British Crown and ask for it to be separated. And so we have a situation, Mr. Presiding Officer, where the reason given at the time by the British Crown that Tobago was not economically stable, that reason was now being eroded because oil and gas was being found in Tobago waters, and we had a situation where one can theorize that Trinidad under Williams wanted to remain in control of Tobago. And what happened? Trinidad and Tobago petitioned the British Crown for independence for Trinidad and Tobago with a draft constitution in hand, which was designed and is designed to take away Tobago voice, not by accident, to take away the rights of Tobago again. Immediately following independence, in August of 1962, Dr. Williams and his PNM government unveiled a $191 million five-year development plan for Trinidad and Tobago. The plan provided for the extension of roads, the increase in hospital accommodation, the construction of new schools, the expansion of the airport, the construction and encouragement of hotels, the organization of new markets, the expansion of electricity, modernization of sanitation systems, and vastly extended water supply. And, listen to this, the development of neglected and maligned Tobago. They proposed a $195 million development budget. Never mind you, Standard & Poor's 500 index tells us, and as Secretary for Strategic Planning and Development, I'm supposed to know these things, tells us that $191 million in 1962 is now worth $150 billion today. You have to let that sink in. $150 billion was the budget, was the 5-year budget back in 1962. And as we sometimes say, good intentions. The road to hell sometimes are paved with them. So we wonder about the timing of some of these legislative changes. 1 year following the unveiling of the lofty $191 million, now worth $150 billion development plan, Hurricane Flora hits Tobago in September 1963. Agriculture in Tobago is decimated. We are now an independent country for only 1 year, and then this happens. The international community reached out to help Tobago. And the report from our then insider in the government of Trinidad and Tobago tells us that the monies promised to Tobago was in the tune of $44 million. This represented 1/5 of the development budget promised by the PNM to develop Tobago and to spend some of Trinidad and Tobago and to spend some of it on the neglected Tobago. Today, that $44 million would be worth $34.6 billion. So when we see the difference in the development between Tobago and Trinidad, this is the perspective that we must have. $34.6 billion was promised to Tobago, and not a cent given to us from the PNM central government of Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to, sometimes, I remember during the election, somebody said, the refrain keeps ringing in my head, that they're liar, they're wicked, and they're Tobago hating. Now, just quoting Mr. Presiding Officer. So again, timing. I have to wonder if, because the prospect of international aid and the government passed, I have to wonder if before the prospect of international aid, the government passed the Development Loans Act of 1964 to borrow for the development, to borrow this $191 million. How come just months after we know $44 million is coming, in December the government is passing the Central Bank Act and becoming the first nation in the region to have in fact a central bank? All of a sudden we need a central bank. We know what history is supposed to be, because before that, oversight used to be from the British Caribbean Currency Board. So I have to wonder, because if this money had went through the British Caribbean Currency Board, more than likely it would have ended up in Tobago. But because now we are a central bank of Trinidad and Tobago, not controlled by the PNM, of course, not a cent. Not a cent for Tobago. And so that money was not spent in Tobago. And when it became clear that by the mid-1960s and up to 10 years after Hurricane Flora, that Tobago would not benefit from the international aid, and that the Trinidad was using the income generated by the national economy, Tobago began to agitate again. Should I say, they began to voice their will again, invoking the plan for if the union with Trinidad became disadvantageous and undesirable. And by that time, it had, by the election of 1972, our unseen hand again in the government had now become visible, organizing a no-vote campaign to move back to Tobago. So picture discussions beginning in Tobago to petition the British Crown for support to leave the Union were being had. And what happens next in Trinidad and Tobago? By August of 1976, Dr. Williams and the PNM moved to make Trinidad and Tobago a republic. And the British Crown is removed as head of state. Wouldn't that be a creative way to remove the ears if we could silence the voice? So timing, I wonder about the timing. Tobago, as we know, voted out the PNM the very next month. Again, we expressed our will and voice through the avenue that we had. And later on, other speakers will tell you about what happened between 77 and 80 that ended up in the watered-down THA Act, where again, we expressed our voice and our will in the elections of 1981, the THA elections of 1980, and the elections of 1986. After 1994 and successive losses, 1984, sorry, and successive losses in Tobago, the PNM, realizing that it had lost the people of Tobago, went to the UN and passed the Archipelagic Waters and EEZ Act of 1986 with a view towards making the islands of Tobago and Trinidad a single, indivisible geographical space, forcing a joining in the face of a clear loss of democratic legitimacy of the union between Tobago and Trinidad. Now, this is critical as we remember that 2 decades later, oil and gas discoveries were trending into Tobago's waters, and those in Port of Spain needed a way to ensure that it would become impossible or more and more difficult for us to do what we've said we wanted to do since 1887, not to be joined to the Union. Notwithstanding all that, this act took effect in 1986, November. 1 month later, Tobago and Trinidad voted out the PNM 33-3. However, by that time, courtesy the PNM, and in my best Brigo voice, Tobago was properly tied. And so I wonder about the timing of these things. My last example, the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act of 2015, passed in the Senate in 2015, stood in abeyance for 8 years. 8 long years while the PNM government on both islands enjoyed free rein to procure whomever they pleased and from whomever they pleased for how much they ever pleased. In December of 2021, the PNM were defeated in the polls in Tobago by the PDP, then TPP, and just about a year after this administration assumed office, when it became apparent that the PNM free for all, not free for all, but free for only PNM people, friends and family and financiers, was coming to an end. All of a sudden, after 8 years, the PNM government in Trinidad finally was ready for full proclamation of the new procurement regime, slowing down every aspect of development and bureaucratizing the process, in my view, to stymie the government in Tobago's chances of development. And so, I wonder about the timing of these things. This motion today is an opportunity for us in Tobago and for those Tobagonians in government and those Tobagonians in Trinidad to understand that legislation that impacts Tobago must be supported by Tobago for it to have democratic legitimacy. And whether we appreciate it or we like it, the way the two houses of parliament are configured, our will and our voice has been, is being, and will be taken away if we don't propose and make these changes. A brief review, Mr. Presiding Officer, of our will and our voice being ignored, suppressed, or sidestepped will show that this common thread runs throughout our history. Decisions were being made on our behalf without any substantive will and voice of Tobago being integral or part of the process. 1887, joining to Trinidad, the Tobago people has no say. 1962, independence from Britain, the Tobagonian has no say. 1964, reappropriation of the hurricane support, international hurricane support, Tobago has no say. 1976, move to republicanism, Tobago has no say. 1977 to 1980, rejection of the Tobago, popular Tobago will by the Seminole draft legislation and the passage to the watered-down THA Act. Tobago has no say in the House. 1985, 1986, archipelagic EEZ definition of Tobago. Tobago has no say. In the early 2000s, negotiation of fishing rights in Tobago waters. Tobago have no say. Farming out last year by Mr. What the Chinese fella name? Mr. Young. Farming out the energy fields in Tobago waters. Tobago has no say. We need desperately, Mr. Presiding Officer, we need desperately to come to a mature place in Trinidad and Tobago where we accept that democracy means that we in Tobago must decide for ourselves. We cannot and we can no longer tolerate and accept a status quo that says that a parliament and a senate, especially that has no Tobago voice, must sit somewhere else and make laws and take actions that somehow we must just follow like sheep. I want to say that the time for that must come to an end, and we in Trinidad and Tobago must mature up and man up and accept that we in Tobago must determine for ourselves how we should govern. And so, Mr. Presiding Officer, the question that arises is what will be the process that will trigger a Tobago referendum? We are proposing a three-track process: political mandate, statutory authority, and constitutional interface. The THA will make a formal mandate to initiate the referendum process. This is what we are starting today. After this motion passes, we will pass a standalone resolution that, one, affirms that the people of Tobago are the political principals, and two, direct the Executive Council of the THA to formally request enabling legislation for a Tobago-specific referendum. This will establish democratic legitimacy before any legal steps. Two, we will request enabling legislation, and we want to propose the name the Tobago Consultative Referendum Act, where the THA will formally petition the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago through the Cabinet to enact ordinary legislation, maybe through an amendment of the THA Act, that would, one, authorize a consultative agenda confined to Tobago that will define who may vote in the electoral roll, who may call the referendum, and turnouts, what will be the turnout and approval thresholds, and matters of eligible for, and who are eligible for the referendum, meaning that we must decide whether a simple majority will be enough, and we must take note that in Scotland, in their attempts to leave the Union with Britain, they only require a simple majority, meaning just to win. In Britain, as they try to move from the European Union through Brexit, all they need was a simple majority. And we have demonstrated by our votes since the 1970s, 1980s, for 16 years, where we have been voting, in my opinion, on this very thing of self-determination for Tobago. And we've been winning those elections upwards of 54%. Even during the PNM years, when we in Tobago gave the PNM a 12-0, that led to Mr. London preparing that bill that went to Parliament. Again, the voice of the people, even with a PNM Tobago and a PNM Trinidad, when the Prime Minister at the time could get up and say that he knows what the Tobagonian wants and list out those 4 things, turns around and waters down the bill again that goes to the Parliament, and neglecting the voice even after the Tobagonians voted the PNM 12-0. Every step of the way in this union, the will and the voice of the Tobagonian and the Tobago people and the Tobago nation is not being heard or adhered to because we have no legal, consultative, direct, democratic process to ensure that it does. And that is why this motion is critical at this time. 3, we will create a joint legislative drafting committee. As the motion is contemplating, the Secretary of Legal Affairs shall convene a drafting committee comprising representatives of the Tobago House of Assembly, constitutional and international law experts, civic society, faith groups, business and youth representatives. This mandate will be to draft the Tobago Consultative Referendum Bill to ensure that it is consistent with the Constitution, that it is consistent with international self-determination norms, that it is consistent with CARICOM and the CARICOM democratic practices. Now we're bringing in CARICOM into it because sometimes we have to appeal supposedly to a higher authority. 4, we're going to ask the Parliament to enact the referendum framework. Once that is enacted, and the law would now allow the THA to trigger a referendum by resolution, so we can come back to this House and ask a 2/3 majority of this very House to trigger a referendum on anything. I personally look forward to a referendum that says that Tobago should compete in sports as a separate entity to allow our sportsmen to finally be able to see themselves in Tobago. So it's not just about autonomy and so on. We need to bring this direct democracy back to the people. So this will allow the THA to trigger the referendum. It will require the EBC to administer it, and it will mandate the results to be formally transmitted to the Cabinet, to the Parliament, and to the President. We would, post-referendum, we would suggest that depending on the outcome, the Act should require a white paper responding to the results be tabled in a fixed time by the Parliament, maybe 6 months, that it would lead to the introduction of constitutional amendment bills and or a Tobago Autonomy Federal Style Governance Bill. This will keep the process structured and prevents the referendum from becoming a symbolic only. So in conclusion, Mr. Presiding Officer, I want to say that the right I want to say that the UN Charter recognizes the rights of the people of a distinct history and socio-cultural identity to decide their own political status. The right to be at the heart of the process of legal, legislative, and constitutional change, rather than to be the objects or victims, and hardly ever the beneficiaries of decisions made by people in other places concerning our lives and our future. That's what the UN Charter is saying. The right to hold fast to the principle that the democratic legitimacy of a union only continues to be legitimate if and only if that union continues to enjoy the support and consent of the peoples that constitute it. And so, we are not here to mash up the thing. We want a process to be structured and in the law. This is a strange thing. I'm actually finishing on time, Mr. Presiding Officer. We want a situation where the Tobagonian and the Tobago people decide what we want, and we want it, if not enshrined in the Constitution, certainly to give us the moral and legitimate and legal status that says that this is what the Tobagonian wants, and that can only come through a referendum process. So I thank you.
The union with Trinidad in 1889 exercised a distinct political and cultural standing, still recognized by the Constitution and the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. And whereas in its final act as a legislature, the Tobago House of Assembly, 139 years ago, passed a motion to preserve, protect, and affirm the right of Tobago and its people to determine their status within the Union of Trinidad and Tobago. And whereas the people of Tobago continue to pursue their right to self-determination, self-government, and equality of status in all matters that concern the sustained peace and prosperity of the island. And whereas existing legislative proposals from Tobago's self-determination do not provide a comprehensive framework for structured consultation of the people of Tobago on matters critical to their governance and the status within the Republic. Be it resolved that this House calls upon the Cabinet and the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago to take all necessary consultative and legislative steps to recognize and protect the distinct status and self-determination of the island and the people of Tobago, and be it further resolved that this House calls upon the Secretary of Legal Affairs to convene, in consultation with the Tobago House of Assembly and representative stakeholders of Tobago, a legislative drafting process to establish a clear statutory framework for consultative referenda, so that the voice and expressed will of the people of Tobago may be formally determined and authoritatively conveyed on matters central to their governance, status, and self-determination. Assembly Member Natisha Charles Pantin, you may now join the debate.
Presiding Officer, may I use Standing Order 42-7?
It is granted.
Mr. Presiding Officer, I have no deficiency of gratitude to extend to my lovely and beautiful constituents of Masonhall South, Bagatelle, for choosing to elect me for a second term as area representative. To be honest, Mr. Presiding Officer, I am overjoyed for the Tobago People's Party after securing the landslide victory in the recent THA elections of January 12, 2026, thus ushering a second term for the Farley Chavez Augustine government. Mr. Presiding Officer, I'm truly humbled by my constituents' vote of confidence and pledge to continue in the same vein, representing my new hard hat division in enhancing infrastructure and transport provision to the people of Tobago, while double duty calls as area representative. At the outset, Mr. Presiding Officer, it would be remiss of me to not mention the rhetoric of the voices absent in these chambers that are being echoed by several mouthpieces in public and on social media. Mr. Presiding Officer, governance was on the ballot. Autonomy was on the ballot. The right to self-government was on the ballot. And also Tobago's bright future as the greatest little island on the planet was on the ballot. This motion, Mr. Presiding Officer, seeks to solicit consensus from the Cabinet and Parliament's recognition to the infinite and unending struggle for self-governance by the people of Tobago, and moreover, to consensus and approach agreeable to give legislative effect to same by 39 parliamentary members whose constituents are not in Tobago East or West, and who perhaps will feel that their representatives should only deal with matters of Trinidad and their respective districts. Herein lies the conundrum, Mr. Presiding Officer, because on the surface, person had to christen the picnic first. What I want to tell the people of Trinidad and their respectives is the country has two children, one Tobago, the other Trinidad, and both of them have to christen. In this, my maiden speech in the new Assembly term, and also as the newly minted Secretary for Public Infrastructure and Transportation, particularly because we all underestimate the role of public transportation, or the lack of it, impacted the social, economic, and political landscape in Tobago in the pre- and post-annexion era. Mr. Presiding Officer, at the heart of the development thrust is the guarantee of all citizens our constitutional rights. Section 4 of the Constitution states, and I quote, "It is hereby recognized and declared that in Trinidad and Tobago there have existed and shall continue to exist without discrimination by reason of race, origin, color, sex, the following fundamental human rights and freedoms." The Constitution goes on to cite 11 rights, among them the right of the individual to life, liberty, security of the person, equality before the law, and the one I will focus on, freedom of movement. Before I leave the Constitution, Mr. Presiding Officer, I should make a plug for the inclusion of geographical region to the list of attributes which should not be the basis of discrimination in any constitutional amendment involving Tobago, because origin does not adequately cover our social and political history. Mr. Presiding Officer, the free movement of people, goods, services, and information are at the heart of every economy in the world. Without this freedom of movement, economic markets crash, country economies collapse, and businesses fold, leading to economic depression. A key component of this system is the public transport system, which has played a role in representative politics in Tobago since the post-1889 period. According to Dr. Susan Craig James in her book, The Changing Society of Tobago, A Fractured Whole, Volume 1, and I quote, "Subordination to Trinidad through the annexation of 1899 was a high price for Tobago to pay for the hope of economic recovery. She contended that Tobago's recovery depended on the extent to which the social groupings in Tobago could influence the colonial state in England, but the terms of the Union left Tobago bound hand and foot because colonial administrations always sided with Trinidad as the local authority. In this magnificent piece, Dr. Craig James stated that Tobago's opinion leaders had greatest influence when their interests coincided with or did not obstruct the interests of the colonial office in England or the dominant class in Trinidad. Today, the same applies, only that the dominant class in Trinidad and the influence of the 39-vote majority now stands in the way of the realization of the right to self-determination enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948. The International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, 1976, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Mr. Presiding Officer, all these conventions were signed off by this country as an upstanding member of the United Nations community. Should this support be automatic? To prove the point, Mr. Presiding Officer, from 1889 to 1893, John McKillop was the governor's nominee in the National Legislative Council, followed by George Horatio McCrane. Mr. McCrane's maiden speech in July of 1893 outlined salient issues affecting Tobago, particularly that at that time, a trip to the Trinidad Parliament to conduct the affairs of Tobago would see them stranded in Trinidad for up to 2 weeks due to the inconsistent inter-island steamer service. Mr. Presiding Officer, I hope this is ringing a bell. I hope the bell is ringing down there. I hope the bell for Tobago's justice is ringing in the House of Parliament, Mr. Presiding Officer. Tobago's transportation woes did not end with McCrane's speech, because he asked for a special sitting of the Legislative Council scheduled to deal with Tobago matters to maximize his presence at the Council. Despite its value and the reasonableness of the proposal, it was never implemented, Mr. Presiding Officer. Tobago's woes still did not end there. Due to the continued sea bridge problem, the representative attended very few sittings between 1903 to 1913, a 10-year period with Tobago's representative voice being stifled at the national level. In the 12 years between 1913 and 1925, there was no representation from Tobago in the Legislative Council due to poor public transportation. For much of the 20th century, the author penned, sea communications remain deficient. Mr. Presiding Officer, these sentiments are made prophetic every time Tobago's right to self-determination reaches the climax of the national conscience. Sadly, for most of this country's history, the national conscience was ruthlessly governed by a political dynasty opposed to Tobago's God-given right to self-determination. Mr. Presiding Officer, it took 10 years for the initial decision to make Tobago a ward in the unitary state of Trinidad and Tobago to actually take effect. Much of this was based on the sentiment in Trinidad considering Tobago as a burden, remarked as a hard-sucking calf. Notwithstanding this, Tobago's clapped back that it was indeed the milk cow in the national dynamic. This was again echoed in the initial motion on internal self-government in January 1977, piloted by the Venerable A.N.R. Robinson. But for the bravery and support of the ULF-10, this bill still languished in committee stage for 3 long years before an attenuated compromise resulted in the re-establishment of the Tobago House of Assembly in 1980. I wish to let this Hansard record the role of the ULF played because too often our political opponents try to race bait Tobagonians into the fear of the ULF and its successors. Mr. Presiding Officer, Tobagonians and Trinidadians should know that when it mattered at Tobago's watershed moment in politics, the names that supported us were from the then opposition United Labour Front. And when the government of the day sought to run out the clock in bureaucratic red tape, Mr. Robinson leaned on the genius of Lionel C. Mungal for an alternate draft for internal self-government. So let me do my part, Mr. Presiding Officer, in placing this Hansard to record our gratitude to the ULF members and their surviving relatives. Tobago thanks the Honorable Ms. Havisa Khan, former member for St. Augustine, the Honorable Paul Harrison, former member for Caroni East, the Honorable Ramesh Lachmidial, former member for Chaguanas, the Honorable Kelvin Ramnath, former member for Couva South, the Honorable Winston Nanan, former member for Tabakit, the Honorable Nizam Mohammed, former member for Princestown, the Honorable Errol MacLeod, former member for Oropuch, the Honorable Budram Jatan, former member for Naparima, the Honorable Rafid Shah, former member for Siparia, and the Honorable Basdio Pandi, former member for Couva North. May those that are departed rest in peace, knowing that the struggle they supported in 1977 lives on in us today. All this, Mr. Presiding Officer, when all the PNM members refused initially to support the motion and even supported the closure of the Ministry for Tobago Affairs in their debate contributions. This debate calls on the bells of Tobago freedom ringing out, Mr. Presiding Officer. Just like the loud bell on election night, signaling the voice of Tobago, 15 tolls of the blue bell, Mr. Presiding Officer. Mr. Presiding Officer, the issue of self-governance has had a major impact on infrastructure in Tobago. The long-denied export license for Studley Park Quarry Limited was finally granted by the Kamla Prasad Bisesa UNC-led government. Mr. Speaker, $400 million more on the recurrent budget, the increase in the number of flights to Tobago, and now we are calling for the icing on the cake. Mr. Speaker, in as much as this contribution is made in Tobago, Mr. Presiding Officer, in as much as this contribution is made in Tobago, it is aired towards the parliamentary representatives in the lower and upper houses of Parliament. It is ringing these rhythms in the tradition of call and response. Tobago has called 15 times, Mr. Presiding Officer, and we will make 2 more calls in the National Parliament. How will the Parliament respond? This is a chorus we are all looking forward to hear, ringing back in our direction 39 echoes of our rights to self-determination. Mr. Presiding Officer, this is the time for all members of Parliament to recall that we are all connected by the fabric of destiny. What affects one affects all. This matter for internal self-government affects 66,000, and therefore it should affect the 1.4 million across the sea. Mr. Presiding Officer, this calls on the acknowledgement of all the international human rights charters the country has signed, another 39 echoes for the human rights in Tobago East and Tobago West. Mr. Presiding Officer, the solidarity with the Tobago people in their quest for internal self-government also rests with the Tobago 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone designation and equitable distribution of the wealth of this nation proportional to Tobago's actual contribution in times past and in the future, that calls for 200 echoes from our Parliament in solidarity with Tobago's right to its EEZ. Mr. Presiding Officer, As I close, we will not sing from the chords of Lord Melody, who reflected the PNM's dismissal of the right to self-determination with his song, Tobago Independence. No, Mr. Presiding Officer, we rather chant to radical rhythms of brother resistance as a paraphrase. So listen well. I come to deliver the word of the Dung Press, be heard all over the world. Let Tobago's story be told. Well, it's a long, long time Tobagonians come out for action. Glory days come down. Tobago has come with its bell to second this motion and rock the self-government rhythm. Ring the bell in the House of Parliament. Ring the bell of self-government. Let them hear, let them hear. This motion is designed now for the Cabinet to move to action, for Tobago to enter the stage of its development with diversification, self-reliance, self-determination, and human rights as its drivers, not just for our existence, but to make Tobago the greatest little island on the planet. Mr. Presiding Officer, I thank you for the opportunity and the mover of the motion, Assembly Member Trevor James, and invite 66,000 bells to join this chorus. I thank you.
Assembly Member Colonel Alexis, you may now join the debate.
Good morning, Mr. Presiding Officer. Good morning to my colleagues, my honorable colleagues and members of this House. Please allow me the grace of Standing Order 42-7.
Granted.
I am excited and buoyed to be here today to make my maiden contribution in this House. Even more so that it is going to contribute, I have faith that it would contribute to Tobago finally getting self-determination. I must thank the people of Plymouth Blackrock for believing in me and giving me the chance to represent them, which I will do with distinction. Ladies and gentlemen, our voice and our will have been far too long been muted. Let us not forget Tobago was not born in subordination. Tobago did not begin its history as a dependent or an inferior territory. Before 1889 union with Trinidad, Tobago had its own legislature, its own system of governance, direct administrative relations with Britain, and a distinct political and cultural identity. In its final act as a legislature 139 years ago, the Tobago House of Assembly passed a motion affirming the right of Tobagonians to determine their status within the Union. That was foresight. Yet, what has that journey looked like since then? From 1977 to 1980, A.N.R. Robinson stood in Parliament articulating the will of the people of Tobago. He spoke of a Tobago Island Council with real authority over economic planning, development, finances, taxation, borrowing, and infrastructure. Those provisions were in the Simongal Bill. What has happened since then? They were rejected by Cabinet on the basis of a so-called unitary state concept that did not exist then and still does not exist today. What was the result of that? The 1980 Act was sanitized, diluted, stripped of genuine self-determination. Mr. Presiding Officer, in 1992, a draft bill was delivered to the Tobago House of Assembly, marked as constitutional guarantees. Instead, it sought to remove existing powers. Tobago's technical team rejected it outright, describing it as an retrogressive, that is going back instead of going forward, reducing Tobago to vassalage, being in a position of subordination or dependent on another. In 1996, provisions for meaningful self-government was quietly cut at committee stage. The hatchet did not take place in the public space. It was in the shadows of procedural proceedings. In 2013, after broad engagement, a strong bill failed, not because it lacked merit, because it lacked cooperation. 2018, the Prime Minister himself acknowledged fundamental principles that we needed. Let me list those 4 principles that the Prime Minister knew we needed. Equality of status, a federal-type system, clear constitutional boundaries, responsibility of the Tobago administration to formulate and implement policy on matters affecting Tobagonians. Yet those principles were substantively missing from the bill that was forwarded. In 2021, existing powers were removed while fundamental principles remained absent. Lastly, in 2024, Mr. Presiding Officer, despite extended consultations, well-attended, well-reasoned consultations, the bills returned to Parliament substantively unchanged. Consultation without incorporation, engagement without empowerment, voice without authority. And this we have to change. We cannot reduce public participation to public cemetery. That has been tried and has been failing us over and over again. Let us not forget the Attorney General's statement in 1996. The people, the Tobago House of Assembly, can formulate, articulate, and debate, but it is the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago that overrides and has power to supervise the Tobago House of Assembly's affairs. What is wrong with that? He asked. Everything. Everything is wrong with that. If equality is our stated goal, then everything is wrong with that. Equality cannot exist where override is the default. Again, this motion is not about separation. It is about definition. Tobago seeks parity with the Republic. The motion calls for recognition and protection of Tobago's distinct status and self-determination, a clear statutory framework for consultative referenda, a formal mechanism to authoritatively determine and convey the will of the people of Tobago. This is not rebellion. This is republicanism. You may ask, why consultative referenda? And why does it matter? For decades, the will of Tobago has been interpreted by the Cabinet, parliamentary majority, or drafting committees, but never formally determined by the people of Tobago ourselves. If we are serious about democracy, then we must be serious about structured, lawful, consultative referendums. We are calling for thoughtful informed public votes, not rush decisions driven by emotions, and not political stunts, but a carefully drafted statutory framework that defines triggering mechanisms, establishes thresholds requirements, ensures transparent oversight, provides authoritative transformation to the Parliament. So when Tobago speaks, the Republic hears, clearly, formally, and constitutionally. This debate is not merely legal, it is generational. For far too long, Tobagonians have felt that development decisions, fiscal arrangements, and policy decisions affecting their lives are determined elsewhere. The result is frustration, not because Tobagonians lack patriotism, because we demand participation that will be recognized. Peace and prosperity are sustained when people feel ownership in their governance. And ownership requires authority. As the Assemblyman for Plymouth Blackrock, I stand on rich soil of history. I stand on a rich soil of history. Plymouth being the former capital of Tobago, Blackrock a community forged in resilience and enterprise. My people are not asking for privilege, they are asking for partnership. They are asking that when Tobago consults, it counts. They are asking that when Tobago votes, it matters. They are asking that when Tobago speaks, it is not filtered, softened, or strategically edited. I call for courage, my honorable members. I call for courage and partnership, because I alone cannot do it. You can't do it by yourselves. Trinidad, I call for courage. The right-thinking people in Trinidad ask for courage. Let us all come together. Instead of taking one pebble and throwing it in that water, let us all together throw our pebbles in that ocean and create a tsunami effect that would wash upon our shores that self-determination that we have always been clamoring for. It is time that they recognize us, and it is time, and the cycle has to end. It cannot continue. The cycle of consult, dilute, pass, and override. We must instead embrace consult, determine, respect, and implement. Mr. Presiding Officer, history will record when we chose comfort or courage. I repeat, history will record whether we chose comfort or courage, whether we maintain a supervisory model or a matured in partnership model. Tobago's voice has been expressed repeatedly across decades. It has been delayed. It has been deferred. It has been diluted. But it has never disappeared. Today, as a newly elected assembly member, I say this. The will of Tobago must no longer be advisory. It must be determinative. Let us ensure that when future generations study this period, they say, this was the moment when consultation became, I'll repeat. This was the moment when consultation became constitutional. This was the moment when equality became enforceable. This was the moment when Tobago's voice was not merely heard, but honored. I support this motion. May wisdom guide this House, and may wisdom guide Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you.
Assembly Member Darren Henry, you may now join the debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Presiding Officer. Pleasant morning, Mr. Presiding Officer, members of the Tobago House of Assembly, all gathered in the chamber. To my electoral district of Bethel Newgrange, pleasant good morning. To my friends who would have assisted me in preparing my maiden speech in this August House, I just want to say pleasant good morning and thanks. I rise today with deep conviction to lend my unreserved support to the motion before this August body. The motion
Member?
called...
You're not supposed to read.
Sorry, I forget to ask, sorry. Please permit me to stand on standing order 42-7.
Granted.
Sorry about that. And it's there right in paper, I just forget it. Sorry about that. Sorry. Right? The motion calls for, right, I'll start over. I rise today with deep conviction to lend my unreserved support to the motion before this August body. The motion calls for clear legislative and constitutional provisions for the consultative referendums to determine the voice and will of the people of Tobago on matters fundamental to our future governance and status within the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. This motion is not a fleeting political slogan, nor an exercise in rhetoric. It is a continuation of a historic struggle for recognition, a struggle that predates this assembly, that is embedded in the psyche of Tobagonians, and that has been articulated in concrete political, legislative, and constitutional efforts over several decades. As Secretary responsible for Environment, Climate Resilience, and Energy, I come before you not only as a servant leader entrusted with stewardship of our natural heritage and sustainability, but also as a Tobagonian deeply committed to the democratic, constitutional, and institutional evolution of our beloved island. Mr. Presiding Officer, between the period 1980 to 1996, the call for enhanced autonomy and a more progressive governance arrangement for Tobago are not new. They are rooted in a long constitutional journey, one that begins long before the establishment of the Tobago House of Assembly in 1980. The establishment of the THA in 1980 was an institutional milestone that offered a structured platform for self-governance for citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and residents in Tobago. Tobagonians welcomed the authority this assembly afforded, an authority to govern matters of local concern and direct the priorities of our island. The first election of this House in November 1980 undermined the democratic energy of our people when the Democratic Action Congress won a clear mandate to lead. The electoral and legislative milestone was embraced again in 1984, where the people reaffirmed their trust and desire for local governance and responded to the unique needs of Tobago. This expression of confidence in the mandate was achieved with an even greater result at the polls in that year. These early electoral outcomes reflected a deep, sustained desire for a governance structure that responded to Tobago's needs with autonomy and accountability. Yet even with these early expressions of democratic will, governance arrangements remained incomplete. Powers over key aspects of public policy remain with central government, and Tobagonians continue to assert the need for fuller constitutional recognition of our distinct voice. In 1996, the Tobago House of Assembly Act was revised, extending our responsibility through the fifth schedule. This was a critical achievement, yet one that still left Tobagonians calling for deeper autonomy and greater legislative authority, not merely administrative empowerment, but robust constitutional authority proportional to our aspirations and responsibilities. Over the 2005 to 2013 period. Mr. Presiding Officer, throughout the early 2000s, the discourse on autonomy matured, shaped by formal THA resolutions in 2005, which urged comprehensive reform rather than piecemeal delegation of power. Subsequent national and THA elections in 2010 and 2013 reflected the electorate's evolving expectation that Tobago must be enabled through the law and constitutional structure to chart its own destiny in harmony with its democratic will. In those years, dedicated committees and consultation, including the 2013 Self-Government Task Force, on which prominent Tobagonians like Alan Richards, Deborah Moore Miggins, and Terence Henry sat, began studying how legislative and constitutional mechanisms could entrench Tobagonians' self-government with great clarity and legitimacy. During the period 2021 to 2026 and beyond, the 2021 THA elections culminated in an unprecedented split of representation, affirmed the intensity and diversity of Tobagonians' political will. In the same year, draft constitutional amendment bills, notable the Constitution Amendment Tobago Self-Governing Bill 2021 and the Tobago Islands Government Bill 2021, attempted to translate decades of discourse into legislative arrangement. These efforts, however flawed in design and inadequate in provisions, were aimed at providing Tobagonians with constitutional instruments to determine, through democratic mechanisms, the framework under which the island would be governed. And now, as we stand in 2026, this Assembly, through the democratic electoral process, have renewed its mandate to advance the autonomy agenda. The expansion and recognition of THA's executive divisions, including the creation of the Division of Environment, Climate Resilience and Energy, which I have the honor and responsibility to lead, reflects a broad strategic commitment to sustainable development, environmental stewardship, and resilience on our island. These priorities do not exist in isolation. They are integral in the overarching constitutional conversation about who we are as a people and how we govern ourselves. The case for a referendum framework. The motion before us calls for legislative provision for consultative referendums, not as an abstract instrument, but as real legal empowered mechanism through which the people of Tobago can assert their will on matters of fundamental importance. This august body, that is the Tobago House of Assembly, is uniquely placed to champion legislation that, one, provides statutory clarity on triggering mechanisms for referendums, two, defines the conduct, oversight, and binding nature of referendum outcomes, and three, ensures the voice of Tobago is not only heard, but legally recognized within the constitutional fabric of the Republic. Such referendums would complement our democratic processes, not supplant them, but will strengthen mutual respect between Trinidad and Tobago.
Member, it is customary that we break at 12 for lunch, so I don't know if you want us to break after the current speaker or...
Mr. Presiding Officer, I beg to move that the House remains seated until all matters in the order people are dispensed with.
The question put, honorable members, is that the House remains seated until all business on the order paper are dealt with. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any against? The House shall remain seated until all business on the order paper are dealt with. Continue, member.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. As I continue, such referendums would complement our democratic processes, not supplant them, and would strengthen mutual respect between Trinidad and Tobago by ensuring that major constitutional questions affecting Tobago's status are settled and the ballot box with full democratic legitimacy. Stakeholder concerns on autonomy and holding referendum. Mr. Presiding Officer, in local and national political discourse, there will be voices raised in concern, in hesitation, and in caution, and rightly so. It is part of the democratic process. However, allow me to quickly address some of the common concerns here today, not to dismiss them, but with a view to demonstrating that a referendum framework is a very legitimate, inclusive, and democratic way forward regarding the questions at hand. Some are concerned that, one, there is no national consensus on autonomy. In response, Mr. Presiding Officer, I submit that this motion does not require national consensus before Tobago can have a consultative referendum. In fact, a referendum is precisely the democratic tool that allows diverse populations to express their will directly and transparently. To argue that only predetermined consensus justifies a democratic vote denies the very purpose of a referendum, which is to measure public will fairly across all stakeholders. Moreover, this motion calls for a statutory process to hold our referendums, not to impose outcomes which by design includes robust public education and consultation so that every citizen can make informed choices. Two, Mr. Presiding Officer, some suggest that autonomy bills already fail in Parliament, so the issue is settled. To this, I say that the failure of the Constitutional Amendments Tobago Bill 2013 and the Constitution Amendment Tobago Self-Governing Bill in 2024 reflect political dynamics, not the democratic will of the people. It does not reflect a rejection of the idea of autonomy, rather is an indicator of a political impasse created by competing legislative designs, inadequate consensus building, and political strategy rather than by the will of the people of Tobago. Our referendum has the power to break that impasse by empowering citizens themselves to speak directly on constitutional questions. Three, further, some may say that referendums aren't part of our constitutional tradition. While this may be true, the absence of referendum provisions is precisely why this motion seeks legislation to establish them lawfully and transparently. Our referendum does not contradict our Constitution. It strengthens democratic participation. Mr. Presiding Officer, the fact that our Constitution currently lacks an express referendum provision is precisely why this motion is crucial. It calls for legislative and constitutional mechanism to be created, ensuring that when referendums are held, they will be consistent with constitutional supremacy and democratic legitimacy. Rather than seeing the absence of referendum as an impediment, we should view it as a democratic shortcoming to be remedied, enabling our people directly and legally to determine matters of deep constitutional importance like the autonomy question. Four, Mr. Presiding Officer, it has been suggested in some quarters that autonomy won't fix all of Tobago's problem. It is true that autonomy is not a panacea for all of our issues, but a referendum allows the people to weigh the costs and benefits themselves. It is worth emphasizing that the focus here is on democratic legitimacy, not on guaranteed outcomes. Five, Mr. Presiding Officer, some are concerned about autonomy bills debated in Parliament were flawed, too rushed, or failed to represent the interests of ordinary Tobagonians, and therefore that reform should be reconsidered before moving to a referendum. Interestingly, the very existence of these criticisms underscores the need for a referendum. When stakeholders feel that legislation is unrepresentative or rushed, a referendum offers a mechanism to resolve those disputes through inclusive and transparent public engagement rather than leaving decisions solely in the hands of legislative actors. Our referendum process can be designed to ensure clarity, inclusiveness, and informed debate, which is exactly the remedy critics are calling for. 6. Some raises concern that greater autonomy or even proposal for self-determination could lead to political instability, economic uncertainty, or unintended consequences on national unity and governance structure. Mr. Presiding Officer, these concerns are serious and deserve robust discussion, but they are also precisely the kind of issues a referendum is designed to illuminate and address. Referendums allow citizens to weigh potential benefit and risks, to hear expert testimony, and to express collective judgment through peaceful, democratic means. If the people of Tobago, a full and fair public debate, choose to affirm greater autonomy or specific constitutional arrangement, the collective decision formalizes through a referendum will be a far stronger foundation for policy than political supposition based on incomplete information. And 7, some national legislatures may dismiss the autonomy referendum as a political issue manipulated for electoral advantage, rather than a genuine constitutional concern that should be the focus of substantive policymaking. Let me hasten to say that on the basis of recent democratic developments, we do not have any election to win at this time, certainly not for the next 4 years. Mr. Presiding Officer, while politics inevitably has an influence on legislation, we must not reduce the matter to constitutional and democratic importance to mere electoral strategy. Holding a referendum is the best solution to partisan brinkmanship because it shifts the divisive voice from politicians to citizens. Democratic maturity is not evidenced by avoiding difficult issues for fear of political controversy. It is evidenced by creating lawful means for the people to decide those issues for themselves. In concluding, Mr. Presiding Officer, as Secretary with the responsibilities for environment, climate resilience, and energy, I am guided every day by the imperative of sustainable, forward-thinking governance, protecting our natural heritage, adapting to climate change, and advancing sustainable energy transitions, not merely sectoral priorities. They are reflections of a people determined to secure a prosperous and resilient future. This commitment mirrors the broader aspirations of constitutional autonomy that Tobagonians should have the legal competence to shape, implement, and define policy pathways that reflect our island's priorities, whether in environment, energy, community development, or governance itself. Therefore, Mr. Presiding Officer, the motion before us is timely, necessary, and deeply rooted in the democratic will of the people of Tobago. It is a call for clarity in process, for legitimate expression of the will of the people, and for a constitutional mechanism that reflects the maturity of our political identity. The pursuit of autonomy for Tobago, as articulated in this motion, is anchored not in separatism, but in the democratic principle that Tobagonians possesses, the right to determine the terms of their governance, to participate equally and meaningfully in the affairs of our republic, and to shape institutions that reflect our destiny, history, culture, and aspirations. This august body owes it to the people we serve, to the generation who fought before us, and to those Tobagonians who will inherit tomorrow, to support this motion with conviction and resolve. However, Our work cannot be done here alone. Mr. Presiding Officer, the people of Tobago seek not only the support of this Assembly, but a genuine partnership with the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, the body constitutionally empowered to give legal effect to the democratic aspiration of all Tobagonians. This administration call upon the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago to join us in good faith to approve the necessary legal, administrative, constitutional, and institutional mechanism required to facilitate a consultative referendum in Tobago to the question of constitutional autonomy. The Parliament is encouraged to work collaboratively with the Assembly in consultation with the government and the people of Tobago to provide one statutory authority for holding a referendum, and that is constitutionally sound, transparent, and binding its democratic expression. 2, clear legal frameworks for administering and overseeing the referendum process. And 3, constitutional recognition of the outcomes of such a referendum as an expression of the collective democratic will of Tobagonians. I make this appeal not as a concession, not as a plea, but as a constitutional necessity grounded in democratic principle, law, and mutual respect, recognizing that the future of our republic is best advanced when the distinct voices and mandates of all its people are honored, understood, and empowered to be heard. Mr. Presiding Officer, it is in this spirit of partnership between Tobago and the wider nation that is Trinidad and Tobago that I register my unwavering support for this motion and urge my colleagues both here and in the National Parliament to embrace this opportunity to shape Tobago's constitutional future with courage, clarity, and steadfast determination. I thank you most kindly.
I am not allowed the privilege of having a team, so I'd like this House to stand in recess for 5 minutes, please.
Discussions resume in the People's House, and this time, we focus on Tobago's autonomy. The House will call on Secretary of Legal Affairs Adana Joseph Wallace to guide the creation of a framework for structured consultation with the people of Tobago as the pursuit of self-determination continues. The House will also call on the central government to take all steps to recognize and protect the distinct status and self-determination of the island and people of Tobago. This time, we meet on Friday.
Who say Friday? Friday. Who say Friday? Friday.
27th February from 10 a.m. Our doors are open and all channels are clear. Come in or tune in. Either way, don't miss it. Discussions resume in the People's House, and this time, we focus on Tobago's autonomy. The House will call on Secretary of Legal Affairs Adana Joseph Wallace to guide the creation of a framework for structured consultation with the people of Tobago as the pursuit of self-determination continues. The House will also call on the central government to take all steps to recognize and protect the distinct status and self-determination of the island and people of Tobago. This time, we meet on Friday,
Who say Friday? Friday. Who say Friday? Friday.
27th February from 10 a.m. Our doors are open and all channels are clear. Come in or tune in. Either way, don't miss it. Discussions resume in the People's House, and this time we focus on Tobago's autonomy. The House will call on Secretary of Legal Affairs Adana Joseph Wallace to guide the creation of a framework for structured consultation with the people of Tobago as the pursuit of self-determination continues. The House will also call on the central government to take all steps to recognize and protect the distinct status and self-determination of the island and people of Tobago. This time, we meet on Friday,
Who say Friday? Friday. Who say Friday? Friday.
27th February from 10 a.m. Our doors are open and all channels are clear. Come in or tune in. Either way, don't miss it. Discussions resume in the People's House, and this time we focus on Tobago's autonomy. The House will call on Secretary of Legal Affairs Adana Joseph Wallace to guide the creation of a framework for structured consultation with the people of Tobago as the pursuit of self-determination continues. The House will also call on the central government to take all steps to recognize and protect the distinct status and self-determination of the island and people of Tobago. This time, we meet on Friday,
Who say Friday? Friday. Who say Friday? Friday.
27th February from 10 a.m. Our doors are open and all channels are clear. Come in or tune in. Either way, don't miss it.
afternoon to those who are viewing online and in person. Mr. Presiding Officer, allow me to start by congratulating you on your ascension to this esteemed position. I am excited to see, with your leadership, the expansion that will happen in this House. To the people of Belgarden, Glamorgan, runs all the way from Kendall to Goldsboro. I can't even say Goldsboro by the bridge, so let's just say Goldsboro. I want to say thank you for offering me another opportunity to represent you in this august House. I rise, Mr. Presiding Officer, in firm support of this motion that has been posited almost like a history lesson by my colleague, Assembly Member Secretary Trevor James, Secretary with responsibility for strategic planning and development. It was placed, what we have placed in this House, Mr. Presiding Officer, is not just a slogan, it's not just a reaction, it's not just a political theater, but in fact it is constitutional architecture. It is, Mr. Presiding Officer, us seriously taking the people's mandate at heart. So let us start there, at the beginning, with the mandate that we were given. Mr. Presiding Officer, autonomy is a blueprint mandate. It is not just a reaction. In fact, the Tobago People's Party placed autonomy squarely within our blueprint under the theme governance and constitutional reform. We committed to, and it is written in the document, constitutionally protected legislative authority, a guaranteed and predictable fiscal framework, critical, institutional strengthening, and a structured and transparent consultative pathway. That is what we promised to the people of Tobago. That is what the people of Tobago voted for. They did not vote for ambiguity. They did not vote for just symbolism. And they did not vote for just administrative decentralization dressed up as autonomy. What they voted for was a structure that works for all of us. Mr. Presiding Officer, when this administration won the 15 seats, we did so that not for us to simply manage the status quo. Tobago did not give us a clean sweep so that we could negotiate timidly. Colleagues, man up and woman up. They did not expect us to do it timidly. They do not expect us to give them any half measure dressed up as progress. They did not give us that mandate to do something that is structurally uncertain. They did not give us that mandate to sound impressive, but have it dissolve under real scrutiny. They were tired of being told, take little and live long. Remember when we were being told that continually? The Tobago People's Party did not ask for this mandate lightly, and therefore we, colleagues, should not treat it lightly. What this motion does, Mr. Presiding Officer, is to begin the clinical execution of what we promised the people of Tobago. So, there's always discussion about whether we should use the word autonomy. And it's actually one of the things that we have been told, we don't know what we mean, therefore they can't give it to us. But let's be clear. What we are talking about is a legal design that does several key things. It's to determine, one, who holds final decision-making power. Who? Us or somebody else? Whether that authority is protected or not. Whether it can be overridden, meaning someone can just come and decide you made that decision, but no, we overriding it anyway. Whether it is financially viable, because to be honest, if we don't have the money to do what we need to do, we're just spinning top in mud. And whether it is institutionally supported. Because what we do not want is to have this thing known as autonomy, possibly have the money to do it, and then we fall flat because we don't have the institution that allows us to execute. Mr. Presiding Officer, what this House has done by bringing this motion so early in this term is show political maturity. And it is entirely fitting, Mr. Presiding Officer, that this motion was brought by the Secretary with responsibility for strategic planning and development. Because development without constitutional clarity is very, very, very fragile, while strategic planning cannot rest on uncertain authority. When we say to the member, this is what we are asking, our Tobago is asking you to do, he and his team must know that he has the authority to do same. And it is why, Mr. Presiding Officer, that I also stand to praise our Chief Secretary, who in his wisdom worked with the team in creating this mandate, creating this blueprint, and within the blueprint, creating this new iteration of the Tobago House of Assembly. It was not just an opportunity to give everybody a post. It is because we understood what Tobago needs at this exact moment, Mr. Presiding Officer, and we are willing to do the hard work to get that done. Allow me to stick a pin and to congratulate our Chief Secretary and congratulate, in this instance, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, who saw it fit to have Tobago represented at the CARICOM for the very, very, very first time, because the government of Trinidad and Tobago seems to understand what we are talking about and seems to be working with us to get us to that kind of authority. This, Mr. Presiding Officer, is us and colleagues. I am happy because sometime in the future, our names will be written in history books as the ones who stood for the people, as the ones who represented the people of Tobago in this momentous period. Again, do not take this moment lightly. Mr. Presiding Officer, there is also something that we must confront. It is the fact that for many, 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 many decades, as a matter of fact, the reason we are still here is because Tobago has been told over and over again that you should wait, you need to negotiate, you need to compromise, you need to be reasonable. In other words, take little and live long. Which is why when my colleagues before detailed the history of this struggle, it is one that we needed to pay very close attention to. History will not be kind to us if we fall back in that same category. History will not be kind to us if we ensure that after all of this, we still do not get to the point where this autonomy discussion is finally coming to a reasonable, decent conclusion for the people of Tobago. Again, man up and woman up, eh? Because autonomy cannot mean permission. It does not mean supervision. It does not mean that Tobago will say, as it did to the then Chief Secretary, Mr. Orville London, that these are the things that we need. The then Chief Secretary sends it to the Parliament through the then PNM administration. The then Prime Minister, in his opening salvo when the bills were laid, indicated that there was so much discussion in Tobago, indicated that the parliamentary councils had looked at it, indicated that this is what the people of Tobago said it wanted. And then somehow after all of that hoopla, when as a minority councillor, I saw the document that was finally laid before the parliament that was taken to the Joint Select Committee in what was that, 2017, 2018, we recognized then that we were being hoodwinked. And it was literally in the dead of night, Mr. Presiding Officer, that we started reading the document that was sent to us, again in the dead of night, just before the day we were supposed to start the consultation with the Joint Select Committee. And it was only then we recognized while reading the document that what we were reading was not the document that the then Mr. Orville London sent to Trinidad. I remember opening the email about 7 the night before the day of the consultation. Now, Mr. Presiding Officer, when we speak about consultation, we know that Tobagonians, honestly, sick and tired of it. Because they have been hoodwinked so many times. They have gone to so many of these things. They have participated. I am sure if you ask the average Tobagonian whether they want to be consulted, some of them would probably tell you, no, we're tired talk about it. And this is why we have to ensure in this iteration that we create a mechanism that is constitutionally binding, so that when we get them to come out one more time, it is not wasted. That it is structured, Mr. Presiding Officer, that it is legally defined, that it is formally recorded, and that it authoritatively conveys what the people of Tobago said that they want. Now, Mr. Presiding Officer, we stand and we sit in this house where there is no parliamentary opposition. Some may see that as a blessing, and let me use this opportunity to again congratulate the member for Darrell Springwim. Thank you. Thank you for that. But let us not take it lightly. Let us not believe that the absence of an opposition means that we are not going to have oversight. Because the people who gave us this mandate, the people who gave us these 15 seats, I want to say, and I want to place on record to the Tobago people, that we have committed to coming back to you and ensuring that you are the ones holding us to account. You are not going to just be spectators in this process. In fact, every single Tobagonian is now a partner, is now an official member, is now here because they have not relinquished that responsibility to a few people. You are the ones ensuring that we stand firm and that we deliver what you have given us or what you have mandated us to deliver. Now, in the future, Mr. Presiding Officer, we will probably speak a little bit more about the fiscal issues about autonomy. But it is important to recognize, as we are going through this motion of determining a legally binding way to get a referendum in Tobago, that if we go into this autonomy thing without looking at protected fiscal frameworks, we will be in trouble. Members before me spoke about the fact that the oil and gas finds were moving closer and closer to Tobago, but somehow we were not able to benefit from those in a way that we should. I continually, on social media, in the public space, hear members from who are our brothers and sisters in Trinidad asking about what Tobago brings to this union. And it is part of them truly showing that they do not understand exactly what Secretary spoke about, that these oil and gas finds have been moving closer and closer. And by the way, if you look at our exclusive economic zones, using a model that speaks about, let's just say, pretend that Tobago was a country on its own and Trinidad was a country on its own, a lot of those fields would belong to Tobago. Let us not be fooled. We have been contributing significantly, Mr. Presiding Officer, to the purse of Trinidad and Tobago. And as I said before, we are the ones who need to man up and woman up, because we need to have these kinds of honest conversations with our brothers and our sisters in Trinidad who do not or may not honestly know that. We are the ones who have to carry that message. The blueprint, it understood that. And that is why it was so clear in its proposed execution to getting us to that greatest little island on the planet status. Now, some people may ask, are we ready in Tobago? It's a fear. It's a genuine fear. And if we're honest, if we look at what happened over the last 2 weeks, last 3 weeks, when it comes to the vessel not being able to sail as it should, and the fear that was being drummed up about us not being able to feed ourselves, it is a genuine fear that we need to take into consideration as we are moving forward. Because a lot of the people who will show the greatest fear may not be our brothers and sisters in Trinidad. It may actually be our Tobagonians who are genuinely concerned that this thing that we are talking about may cause us to separate, and oh Lord God, what will happen if we really separate from Trinidad? That is not what we are talking about. But we have to recognize that these are genuine concerns within our citizens, and that those genuine concerns must be listened to, and we must come up, Mr. Presiding Officer, with ways of allaying those fears. This year is going to include a lot of re-education. This year has to include a lot of telling people, you know what, those pep talks that we have to give ourselves sometimes, we have to give them to the Tobagonians who are also fearful. We have to do it. Let me just say one thing, Mr. Presiding Officer, that it was last week. I saw a member of the People's National Movement come out from nowhere. I am not even sure what happened before. And there was an entire salvo that was aimed at comparing what happens in St. Kitts and Nevis with what Tobago has been asking for and what the quote-unquote PNM was giving Tobago and so forth. And it is so amazing. But maybe it's not amazing. Maybe it happened at the right time for the right reason. Because Trinbago needed to see how fundamentally flawed that member and therefore her party saw what we have been talking about for all of these years. Under previous proposals for Tobago, what they offered was Parliament being able to override what we did in the Tobago House of Assembly. What they offered was financing that was not secured by a particular formula, but as a matter of fact, what they were offering was us going to a financial review committee that was lopsided and stacked against us. What they offered was structural protections that were incomplete, where there was incongruity between what the Tobago House of Assembly is currently able to do and what their proposals were saying we would be allowed to do. That is not what we were asking for, and it is certainly not what St. Kitts and Nevis has. So the argument was so left field. But pay attention, members, because it also shows that they do not understand what even their Prime Minister said to them in the Parliament when he laid the bill in 2018. We need to ensure, though, that all of us in here who are now the mouthpieces, elected mouthpieces, and the selected mouthpieces for the people of Tobago, we need to be firm in our conviction about what Tobagonians really, really said they want, so that we can make those arguments and make those arguments in a resounding manner to those who have the political will and the political power to make the changes that we need made. And this is why a legally binding referenda is a way that says it's not just the, how many of us in here, 15, 16, 17, 18. It's not just us talking, but we are backed by the 60,000 strong. And because we are backed by the 60,000 strong, you must listen to us. Mr. Presiding Officer, I am proud to stand here today as the first time speaking in this House in this term, because as a young person having come back from university in 2007, 2008, I was actually part of those consultations. I could ring them off like the back of my head because I was one of those, the few youngish people up and down in Works Conference Room and in Signal Hill and in Roxborough Sec Auditorium. So it is an honor for me to stand here, Mr. Presiding Officer, having been given the opportunity a second time to represent Belgan, Glamorgan, and therefore all of Tobago, to be part of the team that is finally going to set this autonomy issue to rest. And I speak of it powerfully, and I speak of it with certainty, because we were not given this 15-0 mandate to play house. Colleagues, this is something that we must deliver, and we have an opportunity to deliver it within this term. So as I said, it's not here. We're not here to shout. We're not here to posture, but we are here to build. We are here to ensure that the people of Tobago can finally say, yes, we have the level of autonomy we have been asking for. The Tobago House of Assembly finally represents this thing that we have always wanted it to represent. And now we are really, really on the trajectory to being the greatest little island on the planet.
Member, you have 4 minutes of speaking time remaining.
Mr. Presiding Officer, I end with how I started, thanking the people of Tobago for that opportunity, thanking you, and hoping that we can work together to make this house even bigger and better. Because what did we say in January? Tobago is we. I thank you.
Assembly Member Megan Morrison, you may now join the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Honorable members, colleagues, those in the viewing gallery, those viewing online, and of course to my esteemed electoral district of Mount St. George Goodwood, which comprises of the villages of Bacalet Park, John Dial, Hope, Mount St. George, Goodwood, and a small piece of Goldsboro up to the bridge, on whose shoulders I stand here today. Without you, I would not have been here. And I'm humbled by the opportunity you have granted to me to serve you for a second term. Long before I go further, Mr. Presiding Officer, I would like to invoke Standing Order 42.7.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Long before the right to self-determination was codified in 1945 Charter of the United Nations, the people of Tobago lived it. Our ancestors, many of them freed rebel slaves, understood struggle, resistance, and the rejection of dominion. They were principled, politically aware, and unafraid to assert their rights. Ironically, Tobago was governed by consulates who themselves have revolted against absolute monarchy and clear authority in Europe, yet attempt to govern a people equally conscious of freedom. Think about that for a moment. Tobago now accustomed being colonized. We are rebellious by nature. while we have subsued over the years, it is not innate in us. From the very beginning, Tobagonians resisted political arrangements imposed upon them. Attempts to attach Tobago to other colonies prior to the Union of Trinidad and Tobago failed. Tobago's resistance was not accidental. It was instinctive, and rooted in its distinct identity. The island developed its own legislature, administrative and financial systems, a political culture that valued representatives, democracy, accountability, and local governance. Some of my colleagues would have presented on some of these points before, but I think with reiteration, it would probably stick somewhere. Even after being reduced to wardship, Tobago's will remain unsubdued. For 25 years, the people of Tobago refused to send representatives to sit on an appointed legislative council in Tobago. That was not indifferent. It was political self-awareness. Indeed, 139 years ago, moved by Mr. Ebenezer Hernandez, Tobago's legislative reserved the right to withdraw from the union with Trinidad if it was proven disadvantageous. My good comrade, Secretary James, highlighted that before. This was not rebellion. It was foresight, an early articulation of what international laws would later recognize as self-determination. Tobago's distinctiveness is therefore not a modern grievance. It is a conscious, historical, sociological, and political identity that has never been dissolved or rectified. This identity is recognized constitutionally. The preamble of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago expressly refers, and I quote, "the people of Trinidad and Tobago," end quote, reflecting the union's two identity, people and island. Tobago is separately demarcated geographically, recognized electorally as a distinct political space, and acknowledged in the Tobago House of Assembly Act as a, I quote, "unique situation," end quote. These legal affirmations are not symbolic. They are an acknowledgement that the people of Tobago possess a distinct political, social, cultural identity within this republic. Yet recognition without operational effect is insufficient. If Tobago is unique, why is its powers ordinary? If the Constitution and legislative distinctiveness is acknowledged, why is it routinely diluted? Structured recognition must translate into coherent authority. Autonomy must be meaningful and aligned with constitutional order. This is not creative decision. It's about ensuring governance matches recognition. The voice of Tobago have been consistently expressed through the democratic process at elections from 1980 to now, well, twice in 2021, the people have spoken clearly and decisively. The ballot box transforms collective sentiments into a mandate. or a blueprint. It is qualified, measurable, legitimate. And if elections give focus to people's voice, a referendum provides structured and legally binding finality. It ensures that, when the people of Tobago speaks collectively, the voices cannot be neutralized or bureaucratized for progress on unilateral decisions or make unilateral decisions elsewhere. Moreover, Tobago's call for self-determination is eternally consistent with domestic and international law. Let me repeat that. Moreover, Tobago's call for self-determination is entirely consistent with domestic and international law. The principle is recognized globally. People who are distinct, historical, and cultural possess the right for self-governance in ways that protect their identity and interests. Within Trinidad and Tobago, the Constitution, Legislative Act, and electoral arrangement all anticipate differentiated governance. Denying self-determination undermines not only democratic legitimation, but also legal and moral coherence of state. Mr. Presiding Officer, operational self-determination is necessary to ensure governance align with the reality of Tobago's distinctiveness. Centralized decision-making has often diluted or ignored the island's voice, slowing development and disconnecting policies from local needs. They don't understand we. They don't know what we want. We have to say what we want. Structured autonomy would allow for local representative governance, ensuring the people of Tobago have meaningful input on matters that affect our lives. It is not separation, I reiterate. We are not seeking separation. This is an effect for constitutional governance for the island of Tobago. Finally, the moral and ethical argument is clear. The people of Tobago are distinct, historical, cultural, and socially different or set apart, and we would like to be able to govern ourselves. Repeatedly denying us structured self-determination and disenfranchisement is woefully inadequate and it is deeply rooted in what the people of Tobago are strongly against. There is a profound obligation on this state of Trinidad and Tobago to align laws and governance and practices with recognizing identity and documented well within our republic. Mr. Presiding Officer, Tobago's distinctiveness is not complete, right? The time has come for Tobago's voice to move from constitutional towards structured determination. I said that already. Acknowledgement must translate into empowerment. For when a state names a people within its supreme laws, it assumes the obligation to govern them in accordance with recognition. Mr. Presiding Officer, honorable members, honorable House, The people of Tobago are asking for coherent constitution and to respect of law. Their identity, history, and voice demands no less. Let the recognition given in words find effect in deeds. Let the Constitution culminate in structural determination. Let the principles of self-determination fully constitute with the Constitution to realize for the people of Tobago its own identity. Mr. Presiding Officer, I rest.
Assembly Member Keegan Dinoon, you may now join the debate. Thank you.
Mr. Presiding Officer, members of this honorable House, good afternoon. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to stand in this House today after such an amazing and sweeping victory for the Tobago People's Party. Mr. Presiding Officer, I want to particularly thank the people of Tobago, but more specifically, the people of the electoral district of Bucco, Canaan, and Mount Pleasant, who would have put their faith and trust in me. And it's because of them that I stand in this honorable House to represent them. I want to thank them sincerely. Yes. Mr. Presiding Officer, in keeping with Standing Order 42.7, I seek leave to read extracts from my presentation.
Granted.
Thank you. Right. You know. Mr. Presiding Officer, permit me to thank the member, Assembly Member Trevor James, for ensuring that young persons like myself never forget the fight and the struggle of the people of Tobago for self-determination. I would like to congratulate him at this time. Mr. Presiding Officer, as Secretary of Youth Empowerment and Sport, I affirm at the onset that our responsibility is not only to debate Tobago's future, but to secure it, ensuring that the next generation inherits an island empowered to shape its own destiny. Under the continued leadership of the Honorable Chief Secretary, Farley Chavez Augustine, we remain committed to advancing that journey, a journey grounded in self-confidence, self-governance, and sustainable development. Mr. Presiding Officer, I rise in unwavering support of this motion, not in confrontation, not in division, but in recognition. Recognition of a simple and undeniable truth. Tobago is distinct. Tobago is unique. And that distinctiveness has always given rise to the right of its people to participate meaningfully in determining their own affairs within this republic. This is not just political rhetoric. It is an historical fact. Long before the union with Trinidad in 1889, Tobago existed as a separate colony of the British Crown. This island possessed its own legislature, its own administrative institutions, and its own system of governance. Tobago was not governed as an appendage. Tobago governed itself. From the 17th and 18th centuries, Tobago experienced multiple European administrations, British, French, Dutch, and even Hollandian influence, yet consistently developed representative institutions rooted in participation and accountability. By the early 19th century, Tobago had established legislative governance, structures reflective of democratic practice long before modern states adopted similar systems. Tobago once fed itself. I remember my grandparents telling me about the steam engine going around the island. I remember my friends in Trinidad telling me how their grandparents looked forward to Tobago pigeon peas. We had thriving cocoa estates. Communities were economically self-reliant. Governance decisions were made by persons who understood the terrain, the people, and the realities of this island. And herein lies the enduring lesson. Decisions about a people cannot be properly made by those who do not understand their lived experiences, who have not walked their communities, shared their struggles, or understood their realities. Policies crafted without lived understanding will almost always miss the needs of the people they claim to serve. Mr. Presiding Officer, on the eve of the Union in 1889, Tobago's leaders understood that there was both an opportunity and a risk. In one of the most remarkable acts of political foresight in Caribbean history, Tobago's legislature passed a motion requesting guarantees that if this union proved disadvantageous, the people of Tobago could petition for the restoration of self-government. Let us pause and reflect on that moment. 139 years ago, Tobago asserted in parliamentary language the very principle we debate today, that the people of Tobago must never lose sight or the right to determine their destiny. This was self-determination before United Nations Charter, self-determination before modern international law gave it a name. Yet history records what followed. Tobago's constitutional status was gradually reduced until the island became an administratively classified as a ward, despite once exercising legislative authority. And we must think about that. Has this union benefited us, or has it placed us in a disadvantageous position? Tobago constitutional status was reduced. Mr. Presiding Officer, Tobago's democratic spirit did not disappear. For generations, Tobagonians resisted the marginalization through participation, advocacy, and persistent calls for meaningful representation. The Constitution and laws of Trinidad and Tobago already recognizes Tobago's uniqueness. Tobago possesses its own assembly, distinct electoral arrangements. Section 43 of the Tobago House of Assembly Act acknowledges Tobago's special circumstances. So the question before us is not whether Tobago is distinct. The law already accepts that. The real question is, if Tobago is distinct, why does Tobago's clearly expressed will so often fail to shape the legislative outcomes governing Tobago's future? Consultations have occurred, reports have been written, recommendations have been made, yet too often, proposals reflecting Tobago's aspirations are diluted and reshaped elsewhere. And respectfully, we must ask, what is consultation if its outcome carries no binding force? Because consultation without consequence becomes ceremony and not democracy. You see, the consequences are tangible. Policies affecting fisheries. My fishermen friends tell me they can't even get a license in Tobago renewed. Infrastructure, tourism, agriculture, environmental management, health, economic development are often designed outside Tobago's lived realities. The fifth schedule assigns responsibility for development outcomes while limiting while limiting authority over policy design. This produces inefficiency, delay, and public frustration. And Tobago people will tell you, you can't steer a boat from dry land. This motion proposes something profoundly democratic, a statutory framework for consultative referenda. Elections express general political will, but constitutional questions require precise democratic measurement. A referendum does not weaken national unity. It strengthens it. It transforms it. It transforms opinion into mandate. It transforms voices into measurable authority. Because unity is not built by uniformity. Our national anthem says, side by side we stand, not one in front, not one behind, but partners, equal in dignity and respect. Mr. Presiding Officer, Tobago once governed itself. Tobago once fed itself. And with vision, partnership, and responsible autonomy, Tobago will again build systems that allow sustainable self-reliance within this republic. This is not separation. This is maturation. A confident nation does not fear the voice of its people. It trusts it. It trusts the voice of its people. Mr. Presiding Officer, 139 years ago, legislators faced uncertainty about Tobago's future. They placed on record a principle for future generations like myself, that Tobago must always retain the right to determine its destiny if the circumstances required it. Today, we are those generations. History now asks us, will we honor their foresight or allow Tobago's voice to remain forever consultative, forever advisory, forever secondary? This motion seeks clarity, not division. It strengthens democracy. It does not weaken the republic. Because a people whose voice is measurable cannot be misunderstood. A people whose will is determined cannot be ignored. Tobago is not asking to be remembered. We are asking to be respected. Once implemented, Mr. Presiding Officer, this motion represents a maturation of Trinidad and Tobago's democratic architecture by the following. 1, institutionalizing consultation, transforming dialogue into measurable democratic expression. 2, reducing political conflict by replacing interpretation with verifiable mandate. 3, strengthening national unity by grounding governance arrangements in demonstrated consent rather than assumptions. Rather than destabilizing the republic, such mechanisms stabilize inter-island relations by clarifying democratic legitimacy. Mr. Presiding Officer, nations are not strengthened when voices are managed. They are strengthened when voices are trusted. For generations, Tobago has spoken with patience, clarity, and dignity about its place in this republic. Today, we ask not for privilege, but for democratic mechanisms worthy of a modern nation. Mechanisms that allow the will of a people to be known clearly, measured fairly, and respected honorably. Because the true test of unity is not whether differences exist, but whether a nation has the courage to listen and the wisdom to act. Let this day mark the moment when Tobago's voice moved from consultation to certainty, from acknowledgement to authority, from being heard to being truly recognized. Mr. Presiding Officer, we have the responsibility to determine how the next generation is going to view us. Are they going to view us as those who came and could have done better, or those who came and did what they were supposed to do by putting the people of Tobago first in everything that they did? Mr. Presiding Officer, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this work.
Assembly Member Trevor James, you may now wrap up the debate.
Mr. Presiding Officer, thank you. Thank you kindly. I want to ask the House to give the member from Buku, what he said, Buku, Canaan, Mount Pleasant, another round of applause. Clearly, Mr. Presiding Officer, he has been a voice in the shadows for too long. But it is always good when new members come to the fore and present on motions like these and demonstrate that the hierarchy of the party did in fact make good choices, and that the people of Tobago agreed with the choices, and they are here demonstrating that they can represent the issues of the people in the various districts in the House. Mr. Presiding Officer, there is no doubt that the Tobago we have inherited is a Tobago that has lived a struggle that many Tobagonians and clearly few Trinidadians understand. Our goal by bringing the motion is not to secede. Our goal is not to separate, but our goal is to expand the democracy that is the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and to ensure that decisions regarding Tobago are made by Tobagonians, and to ask the Parliament and the Cabinet in Trinidad to agree with us, or to say to us clearly that we want to be your imperial leaders forever, and maybe we should consider other actions. The Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago states that the Republic in the preliminaries, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago shall be a sovereign, democratic state. Across the world, where there are multi-state countries, Britain, Canada, all allow for referendums to be held so that individual states can find a way to have their people participate in the electoral and in the decision-making process where issues arise that threaten and possibly undermine their lives and their livelihoods. We have in Tobago been asking, we have been begging, we have been submitting proposals, we have been submitting bills, we've been trying to prosecute this autonomy, self-determination struggle within the confines of the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, and the time is here and now. The future of Tobago is here and now, and we must demand that the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, that has presented laws that hide behind Section 75(1), that gives us some semblance of authority, but have the right to take it back, that we must be able to ask those questions in Tobago to determine for all and sundry across the region, across Trinidad, across the world, that this is what we want, this is how we want to manage ourselves. And that's the crux of the thing. And we don't want those in the parliament, we don't want those forces, those commentators who are opposed to us, because we are in opposition now in Tobago. There may be commentators who are opposed to the idea that we can build this house for ourselves. We can build this Tobago for ourselves, to begin to see, as Dr. Faith tried to allude to, we have the money. So what are you going to do? The reality is, as I tried to demonstrate before, and as we have demonstrated, that we in fact have the resources. And we continue to hide under this type of constitution that does not separate our resources. We try to say, we try to spell out for the people at how almost at every turn, when it looks as though Tobago could move forward, those with responsibility in the parliament took the opportunity to try to contain us in this box that is Tobago and Trinidad. When we thought that Robinson was going to go to parliament, we're going to win the 2 seats with the DAC, and we're going to start this process again, the PNM removed the Crown of England as head of state. So we have nobody to appeal to. And I want to read that, I want to read that motion that was passed in this house. Because almost every speaker alluded to it, but nobody took the opportunity to read it. And this excerpt is taken from the history of the peoples of Trinidad and Tobago, written by Dr. the Honorable Prime Minister Eric Williams of Trinidad and Tobago. I think I get it right. Some call him the father of the nation. And I'm going to quote just an excerpt of it. We conceive that it would be unnecessary and unfair to subject Tobago to such a fiscal union and assimilation because Tobago has no interest in it. And can derive no benefit from can derive no benefit from some of the heaviest burdens of Trinidad. That is what the union, according to the quote that Dr. Williams is quoting from, is saying, that is what will happen. That Tobago will have to bear the burdens of this larger colony in Trinidad. We think, and I have skipped out a few, of course, we think that in some particulars our tariff rates might be, if found necessary, for the prevention of smuggling to be assimilated to those in Trinidad. We believe that particularly such a scheme would include fair arrangements as the cost weekly or half-weekly steam communication with Trinidad. Saying then that for it to work, you had to have steamships coming from Trinidad once or twice a week. Secretary Megan reminded us that no boats traveled for more than a decade, cutting us off from travel, from commerce, not only with Trinidad, but from Grenada and St. Vincent, who we were accustomed to trading with. And this is not me, and this is not TPP, this is Eric Williams quoting it. And I believe this book was written in 1958. So it's not by accident that we are forced today to ask the Parliament and the Prime Minister and the Cabinet to accept the bill that we will send to Trinidad to grant us the opportunity to choose to find a process, a structured, consultative process. We have gone around this country. And people argue, and people have argued, even when Orville do it, that is only the same handful of people going to every meeting and saying the same thing over and over and over, so it's not truly representative. You've heard that argument. We are saying, let Tobago people vote on the thing, whatever the issues are. Whether we want to, as I said before, whether we want to have your own cricket team, or your own football team. A lot of us in here play cricket and football and things in school, and we know the skills that we have seen in Tobago, and we can't somehow self-actualize in sport. Why? Because when our players go to Port of Spain, go to Trinidad, in my time, I couldn't even make the team in Signal Hill. But when Wendell and Pat and Frankie and Pollard go to Trinidad, they had to be 10 times better than the Trinidad to make the team. And they had to suffer the indignity of can't get to come home, sleep in Port of Spain by the park, just to practice. In the meantime, Kitishans, Nevishans, playing for the West Indies. Nevishans, with less than 20,000 people, producing, what the boy named Stuart Williams, Kyron Pollard, El Cumido Willett, 4, 5, 6 players playing for the West Indies cricket team. And we cannot, for the life of ourselves, participate even in Trinidad. So we want to decide. I want to continue this quote because it is mind-boggling that a prime minister can in fact know this, quote it, write it, just like Rowley. Know it, quote it, speak it into the history, into the Hansard, that this is what we know Tobago want, and then turn around and decide to give us something else. And we have to, in Tobago and in Trinidad, understand that it is our right, our inherent God-given right in Tobago to be able to determine for ourselves what we want. It is not nobody else's right. In this house, Tobagonians of the past passed a motion, and this is the quote, again, re-quoted from the History of the People by Dr. the Honorable Prime Minister Eric Williams, that inasmuch as the wish of the people of Tobago for union with Trinidad has principally been based on the representations of the government and the assurances given to the people that material benefits will result to Tobago from such a union, the Secretary of State for the Colonies be respectfully asked, in the event of such a union taking place, to afford the people of Tobago a pledge that should it prove disadvantageous to this colony or otherwise undesirable to the majority of inhabitants, that this colony shall, upon petition, have granted back to it the form of self-government which now exists here. And Robinson tried when he come back. Hochoy tried. Orville tried. And at every time we give them a referendum vote. And the parliament says no. That is unacceptable. And we tried today to demonstrate the seriousness of the motion, not by getting only experienced people to talk, but by inviting newcomers to demonstrate that every one of us as members in this house share that same ethos, that this is what our charges, our districts have told us they want. And it is not up to the Prime Minister or the Parliament to decide it is not what we want. to repeat, we are not seeking to divide the Republic. We are seeking to complete it by allowing the people of Tobago to speak, and to speak clearly, lawfully, peacefully, should the Parliament and the Trinidad public be listening. This is the takeaway. Do you think that it is the right of the Parliament, who has afforded Tobago 2 voices, as what the law says, that in 41 members in the lower house, in 33 members or 31 in the Senate, you can only have 2 voices and 2 votes. That in the Senate, where the law is going to be passed that will affect your livelihood and my children's livelihood, you are afforded no votes by law. The time for that must come to an end, and we're going to respectfully ask the Trinidad Parliament to say to Tobago and to the world that you must never be able to decide for yourself, but we should do it for you. And when we say that, then we will have a real conversation about what it is. We have demonstrated that we have the economic resources. We have identified, not specifically, but I will say some of it now, that there are energy fields in South Tobago, West Tobago, East Tobago, North Tobago, identified, given out. No deference or reference to the people of Tobago. We've had Shakonia field in Tobago waters operating since 2009. And if I'm not mistaken, maybe I'll be mistaken, making more than $2 million per day. Not a cent. If we draw the median line between Tobago and Trinidad correctly, those deep water fields that Exxon is going to explore way down to next Guyana will be in Tobago waters. So it's not a question for those Tobagonians who might be scared that the people of Tobago, as Brother Keegan say, never, you must trust the people in the democracy to decide. So we have been given an overwhelming mandate by the people. And when we speak in this house, we want all and sundry who are listening to us to understand that it is all of Tobago speaking. We went out on a campaign to ensure that every seat was going to be represented in this house by us, because we want to speak for every Tobagonian in every district. And there will be no doubt, there ought to be no doubt that that is what is happening and that is what will happen. The people have signed a social contract with us, with the Electoral Inc., and of all the terms and conditions of that social contract, true self-determination begin and possibly end with constitutional autonomy and self-government. It is the most critical democratic legitimacy that there is. And we stand on it, and there is no question that we want to pursue it. We must therefore solemnly consider our duty to call on Cabinet and the National Parliament to, in consultation with the people of Tobago and the representatives they have elected to lead them, which is this House, to take the legislative steps to constitutionally protect the rights of the people of Tobago and the inherent right to self-determination that we have been struggling for. Beyond agreeing with the right to a referenda and referenda process, we have, in our main presentations, presented the process that we believe should take place. And we're able to do that because we wanted to demonstrate the seriousness with which we are going to move forward with our legislative agenda in this 4 years. So, if it is agreed, and if we agree here today that the ultimate political authority over the people of Tobago will be and must be the people of Tobago themselves, and that when we stand in this house, we stand not just on their behalf, but at their behest. This matter simply comes down to whether the people of Tobago deserve the right to decide. Once again, 140 years later, or whether it is better for decisions about our lives and our livelihoods and the future generations to come will continue to be made in Port of Spain. And that is the question when our proposed bill goes to the cabinet, that the cabinet must answer publicly once and for all. Because when we vote on a referendum, when the questions are structured correctly, the cabinet will decide, or must decide, whether A, you all are our subordinates, you all are our, I don't want to say slaves, but that's the word that came to mind. And we must decide as the imperial authority what would happen. But even if in deciding who should decide and how the decision should be made, we have no real constitutionally protected avenue to make that decision. And hence, we've made the case today. We made the case today for a referendum. Yeah? So let me close, Mr. Presiding Officer, by paraphrasing the words of Premier Daniel Smith of Alberta, one of the provinces of Canada, that we must trust the judgment of Tobagonians on matters such as these. And even for those in Port of Spain, we must trust the judgment of the people in a democracy. We must rise above skepticism of some commentators and politicians who fear direct democracy, such as referendums, and we must support this motion. Maybe if there were referendum laws in the country, you wouldn't have young men standing up smoking weed all over the place. The parliament could sit down by themselves and pass a weed act, but can't pass an autonomy bill. I wish to so move.
Honorable members, the question put is, whereas the island and the people of Tobago, prior to the union with Trinidad in 1889, exercised a distinct political and cultural standing, still recognized by the Constitution and the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. And whereas in its final act as a legislature, the Tobago House of Assembly, 139 years ago, passed a motion to preserve, protect, and affirm the right of Tobago and its people to determine their status within the Union of Trinidad and Tobago. And whereas the people of Tobago continue to pursue their rights to self-determination, self-governance, and equality of status in all matters that concern the sustained peace and prosperity of the island. And whereas existing legislative protocols for Tobago's self-determination do not provide a comprehensive framework for structured consultation of the people of Tobago on matters critical to their governance and status within the Republic, be it resolved that this House calls upon Cabinet and the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago to take all necessary consultative and legislative steps to recognize and protect the distinct status and self-determination of the island and people of Tobago. And be it further resolved that this House calls upon the Secretary of Legal Affairs to convene in consultation with the Tobago House of Assembly and representative stakeholders of Tobago a legislative drafting process to establish a clear statutory framework for consultative referenda, so that the voice and expressed will of the people of Tobago may be formally determined and authoritatively conveyed on matters central to the governance, status, and self-determination. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against, say no. The ayes have it. Motion is carried.
Motion for adjournment.
Honorable members, the question put is that this House now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Presiding Officer, I beg to move that this House now stands adjourned to a date to be fixed.
Sorry about that. I'm a bit hungry, so I could be excused. Honorable members, the question put is that this House now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against say no. The ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed.